All right. Thank you, and thanks for having me. Just want to say that if you see any photo in the slide, it's probably taken by Clark. So he's a much better photographer than I am. So how many of us here have heard about either Palmer amaranth or water hemp recently or in the past? All right. Those of you who have not heard, they are not aliens, they are weeds. So we've been worried about these two pigweed for a long time. And my goal today is to tell you why we've been worried about these pigweeds and then also what we've been doing over the past years to kind of track this down and a way for you to be able to identify those as you drive by. I have some specimen here. Clark might help move them around. If I'm start to talk about them, and then you can see how they are. There are some aphids on them, so please don't get them in your shirt. So I'll start with Palmer amaranth. It's a pigweed, and it is native to the U.S. Southwest. And so because of that, it is not on the federal noxious weed list. However, because of how problematic this pigweed have become, some states have just moved to regulate this as either as a noxious weed or they just restrict or prohibit this in seeds just because they don't want those to spread in their state. And this is how they look like. And if you look from afar, sometimes this looks like a Christmas tree. And the reason is that those leaves in the lower canopy, this pigweed is very efficient. In the Midwest, they said it can grow 2 to 3 inches a day. And so because of that, it has to extend those leaves in the lower canopy to be able to kind of capture that sunlight to grow as fast as it can. It's because of that, it has that Christmas tree-like look. And I will show you some ID photos. The other one is water hemp, and it's also a pigweed. And sometimes the leaves are very slender like that. If you look on afar, you might think it's hemp. It's also native to the U.S., and because of that, it is not on the federal noxious weed. Once again, only Ohio I know of is regulating this as a noxious weed. Some states like Georgia, Indiana, Wisconsin are trying to kind of prohibit those and make sure that if you buy seed, the state certification board kind of look in and make sure that you don't have any seed into it. I hope that Idaho at least move in one of these two directions, at least either to restrict this in seed or prohibit this in seed, or go full on and label this as a noxious weed. And so we will hope that that happens sometime in the future. So as of 2021, I started my job in 2020. And as of that time, we had Palmer reported or present in almost all the states, but the PNW in Montana and a few states in the East Coast. And I was shocked that it wasn't in Idaho. And at that time, we wrote a publication here, and you can Google it just with the title, and you'll pull it up, just to see, just let people know that these are threats and that might come into the PNW. Just be looking out for it. So as at that time, this green here means that we haven't reported it yet or detected it yet in those states. As at last year, this is how the map looked like. And I have a question mark in Washington because they found like 3 or 4 plants. They pulled those, and they are convinced that they don't have it. But I think they're wrong. They just don't know how widespread it is yet. Once you begin to look, you might probably find out that it's worse than you think. I was talking to one of the weed scientists, and he told me that his best prevention method is not looking. And so if you don't look, then you don't know it's there. So like you prevent those from coming to your state. So maybe that's what they are doing now. So Clark took most of these photos here, and this is, I would just spend some time to go through this ID. We have those one-page handouts here that you can grab if you are interested in seeing like how these look like. This is Palmer amaranth, and you can see, as I said, it has that Christmas tree look. And I mentioned that they are very efficient in photosynthesizing just because those leaves are very long, and so they don't shade each other that much. So each leaf is able to capture that sunlight. And so if you look close enough, you can see that those petals are very long to project those leaves. So one of the key features is that unfortunately, the one I have here drop all the lower leaves, but those lower leaves that are fully expanded, um, if you fold the pedal means that this one that attach the leaf blade to the stem, if you fold it over the leaf blade, it's longer than the leaf blade itself. This is the only pigweed that has this feature. If you do this test and you see that the pedal is longer than the leaf blade, you definitely have Palmer amaranth. Also, the stems are very smooth, and I brought some red root pigweed here that Clark is passing around. If you look close enough on the red root pigweed stem, they are very hairy, especially close to the neck of that plant. These are very smooth. There's no hair on the stem. And on top of that, they have separate male and female plants, meaning that the male flowers are different plants, the female flowers are different plants. If they don't have flowers on them, it's impossible to tell the difference between the two. You'd have to wait till they start producing flowers. Because of that, it means that they are able to hybridize quickly, and this has made these pigweed, they develop resistance to almost all the herbicide we use in Idaho. And that's why one of the reasons why we are concerned about them. And so it's not that they are hard to kill or there are some super weeds. The problem is that they develop resistance to herbicide so quickly that if you have it in your crop or in your ranch or in your alfalfa, in your hay, if you spray herbicide a few times, you might have resistance to that herbicide. They've recently found in Kansas that some population that was sprayed with only one herbicide has developed resistance to 6 different herbicide chemistries, meaning that they don't even have to be exposed to some of these herbicides at some time. They can develop resistance to that. So that's one of the reasons why we've been worried about this species. And I did mention that they have that Christmas tree look like, and I know that we just finished the Christmas season, so if you mistakenly grab any of these as your Christmas tree, please make sure you dispose correctly so don't spread the seed anywhere. So the female flowers are the one on top here, and you can see that they have like tons on them, so if you grab them, they're gonna kind of poke your hand. And I told Clark that that's probably a way of just protecting your kids so people don't harvest the seed. The male flowers are very soft, and then if you shake them, you see pollen coming out of it. And so if you only have one or the other, there'll be no seed set, which is a good thing. But the other thing is pollen can travel too, and so they're able to still set seed even if they are far apart. It is not in the same area. The other one is water hemp, and I want to go back so you see the difference. If you see the canopy, see how that one is filled up. The water hemp, the leaves are always more slender. And so, like, if you see the plant that Clark was passing around, they are more like rectangular shape when they are, especially the upper leaves, compared to the previous one that looked more like an egg shape. They are very big leaves. As I mentioned, that the key feature from the previous one is that if you fold that petiole over, it's longer than the leaf blade. This one is not like that. The other one I pass around is also red root pigweed. It's not like that. So that's the Palmer is the only pigweed that does that. This leaf shape would help you to ID water hemp for the most part, especially once they get a little bit taller. When they are smaller, the leaves can also be round like that, but they have like a light green color to them. There's a color difference that a trained eye can detect those, but it doesn't matter. If you see any of those that you are suspicious of, please give us a call. And I would say that we don't have any pigweed in Idaho that is resistant to Roundup. And so if you apply Roundup and there is any pigweed that survives, it is not your regular pigweed. Please let us know. And also, this is also dioecious, means that the male and female plants are separate, and so there's female and male flowers down there. So the same thing, because of that, they hybridize quickly. Genetic diversity means that they can develop resistance quickly to most of our herbicide. We've seen red root pigweed before, and Clark did a good job putting these things together just to see how they like. And I mentioned that red root pigweed have a lot of hairs on the stem, and we probably all know how red root pigweed looks like. But just to show you how distinct, or like some of the features you can use to separate, and those 3 pigweed that I just showed. There are a couple of other pigweed in Idaho, but these are probably the ones that look the most similar or common. We have Powell amaranth common in the Treasure Valley area, but that's you can also tell the difference between that and this pigweed based on some of the features that I discussed. Why you should be worried. I am worried, and I think Clark is worried too, but we just want to go by some of the things that we think that we should be worried about. The first thing is that this pigweed can produce a lot of seeds. Red root pigweed probably close to 250,000 seeds per plant when it gets that big. Palmer amaranth, 500,000, and water hemp can go to 1 million seed easy per plant. And I mentioned that because you can see how those can branch profusely. And the seeds are also a little bit smaller than Palmer and red root pigweed. This is Palmer amaranth seed on the left and red root pigweed on the right. And you can see that they're almost the same size. And these are very small seeds. And you can see some different colored seeds here too. And they do this to be able to kind of, they have like different flashes of germination in a year. Those light colored seeds are able to come up quickly in the season, almost under any conditions. These black ones can stay in the soil for 5 years or more, depending on the condition. And so it's just a way of spreading their germination over time. And this is just some research that's looking at germination temperature requirements. And I think for most weed scientists thought that this pigweed would never move north or move to the west, just because they thought that those were localized in the Midwest in the case of water hemp. And also the Palmer amaranth came from the desert, and so they thought it won't make it up here. But we are all wrong. So this is Palmer amaranth in that orange or red color down here. This germination temperature from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to about 95. So the number of days it takes for them to reach maximum germination. When it's 68 degrees, which is probably when you are coming off from the spring into the summer, it takes less than 2 days for them to have maximum germination. Water hemp and red root pig would take a little bit longer. And you can see that as the temperature increases, because this one came from the desert, this one is 0.6 days. So it takes half a day and everything is up. And Clark would tell you, like, it takes if it's hot and they have water, they can grow up to 2-3 inches a day. And so the problem is that by the time you know you have it, you don't have any herbicide chemistry that will kill these, especially if you're in a crop like dry beans. Because you only can spray Basagran or Raptor, and at that time, it's too late to do that. And so because of that, pre-plant herbicide or pre-emergent herbicide are probably the go-to herbicide for managing these pigweeds, and I will go into some detail later. This is also just kind of comparing, and I can see that the other one ends around 68 days, and this one goes down a little bit to 41 degrees. And you can see that when it's cold, Palmer amaranth still has a little bit kind of germination advantage than the other ones. One thing I want to point out is that they have the same peak germination temperature, around 86 degrees Fahrenheit. But you can see the wide gap between them here, and this is where the problem comes. So Palmer amaranth has a wide germination window. And so because of that, you have those temperature changes over the year, over the season. This can have 4 or 5 different flashes in a year. And so if you are in, say, sugar beets, you apply Roundup at your 2 true leaf stage. By the time you leave the field in 2 weeks, a new flash is up, and so you have to go back and treat them. By applying that Roundup 3 or 4 times in the season, that's what gets you. And so just in 2 years, you might have resistance to Roundup just because it forces you to do that. You can apply some soil-applied herbicides, but then even with that, those will break in 3 or 4 weeks, and so we have to do multiple applications. And so because of that, it forces us to kind of apply way more herbicide than we intend to. I mentioned that they can hybridize quickly, and because of that, that's one of the reasons why they can develop resistance so quickly to this herbicide. And also, they can come up late in the season, so it helps them spread the seed during the crop harvest than the other pigweeds. And this is a picture that Clark took. This was in Hawaii County, it's in Bruno, and it was in potatoes. You can hardly see any potatoes, especially where they are. And you can see that the grower went and then mowed them, but there's still some that they were taller than me. And this is This was in, I think, early August or late July. And so this is still have a few weeks for them to grow, and so they can get this tall. Because of that, it won't be surprising to you if I say that this can produce 500,000 seed easy per plant. And this is just some data showing how competitive this pigweed can be. And so this graph here is just showing we all, who has not seen kochia before? I'll be surprised. Like, we've probably all seen kochia. Kochia is very competitive. It's everywhere. For every population, or like for 1-to-1, you are looking at almost 25% difference in terms of competitiveness when it comes to crops like sugar beet. In dry beans, they found that just 2 plants per 3 feet of row, like almost 80% yield loss, just because they can get this tall. And so they can shade quite a bit of space just with those two, three plants per a small area. In potatoes, just 1 plant per 3 feet of row, half of your yield is gone already. So that's a second or third reason why we've been worried about this pigweed. And I would say that it is not a huge problem in rangeland yet, but most of the population that we found last year, roadside, hay fields, so like it's probably just a matter of time before they spread to other areas that are not crop for us to deal with. Herbicide resistance. I mentioned that this pigweed have developed resistance to herbicide so quickly. And so here is red root pigweed, and the first case of resistance, I think, to atrazine was around 1980. And up until the 90s, no one really worried about this pigweed because it can kill them with almost any herbicide. After the 1990s, when this pigweed began developing resistance to herbicide, as at last year, almost triple what pigweed has done in over 4 decades. And so this is one of the major reasons why everyone has been worried about this pigweed, because in the Midwest and the South, they pretty much run out of herbicide options in most crops. And so the chemical companies came up with Roundup-ready crops to manage that problem. They developed resistance to Roundup. They came up with the Enlist varieties, which are resistant to 2,4-D. They developed resistance to 2,4-D. They added dicamba. They developed resistance to dicamba. They added glufosinate. They developed resistance to the glufosinate. So it just keeps going. And so to the extent that a lot of states, people would spray and then the escapes kind of go through with a weed zapper electrocution with electricity to kill those, to make sure they don't go to seed. And I don't want to own one of these things because the instruction manual just say, don't touch this, you're going to die. Don't touch it, you're going to die because of that high electricity. Hopefully we don't get there, but it could get worse. If we don't spread the word, if we don't get everyone on board, and the states probably pleading with them to just do something in terms of going forward to make sure that this doesn't get out of hand. Washington, I mentioned that they only found 3-4 plants. They moved quickly within last year. They listed this as a noxious weed just so they can devote some resources into managing these pigweeds as they show up. And this is just a list of herbicides that this pigweed have developed resistance to. These herbicide groups. So group 2, we had metrics. We use a lot of metrics in rangeland areas for managing cheatgrass and some other weeds. Group 3 herbicide, not so much in rangeland, but group 4 and 2,4-D dicamba. Group 5 metribuzin, atrazine. Group 9 glyphosate. Group 10 glufosinate or Liberty. Group 14 our contact herbicide, and so like Ultra Blazer, AIM, Reflex. Group 15 our soil applied herbicide, Dual Magnum in this case, and group 27 Mesotrione or Callisto. And this is not like a one-way street. There are populations that are resistant to at least 6 of these herbicide chemistries combined. That's what makes it challenging. And so it's not like you can just throw one of these at it and it's going to kill it. And so that's where the challenge comes when it comes to management in different crops. And I just want to kind of share this because last year we saw something in Bruno that was concerning to me. And I wish scientists share this data, and I felt like I'm just going to throw this in here. This is a research done in Arkansas, and I mentioned that this pigweed can produce up to 500,000 or 1,000,000 seed. What they did was that they went into like an acre and a half field. They spread 20,000 seeds that were resistant to Roundup. And then they just planted a crop, sprayed Roundup, and they came back, harvested that crop, and the next year they came and repeated the same thing. Just in 1 year, from those 20,000 seed that they spread, it increased from less than 1% of the field to 20% of the field. In just 3 years, the whole field was covered with Roundup glyphosate-resistant palm amaranth. So this is how fast this can spread, just because they produce that much seed. And so during the crop harvest, especially if you're doing bean harvest or something that you do late, that at that time all the seeds are viable, this is how fast this can spread. And so just to keep everyone on track. So I just want to summarize this portion by saying that, especially for Palmer amaranth, because most of the species we found are Palmer amaranth, it has that wider germination window, meaning that those multiple flashes in a year. It grows very fast, and so if you are looking to spray post-emergence herbicide, it might get out of hand. Just a few wind or rain events, and you probably get out of hand for it to control that. So it's very, very competitive because it can grow that tall. Difficult to control with herbicide because it grows tall, and it grows very fast, and also develop resistance to most herbicide. And because it came from the desert, if you don't have water, it doesn't care. It probably does better than your crop to go with. So we've been tracking Palmer amaranth. At least I know that people have started before I got here in 2020. But when I got here in 2020, we've been tracking this pigweed in Idaho to see where they are. In 2022, that's when I got a first call. And this one from Homedale. And they had, this guy had a pigeons that he used for like racing pigeons, and so just bought feed for the pigeons, and it came in the seed. So I don't know how far or how fast racing pigeons fly. And so if the feed is contaminated by a lot of seed, this could probably spread really fast because those guys fly around and poop around, and then you have a problem. And so we took a sample from there and sent to a lab. Fortunately, it wasn't resistant to Roundup. That was the only thing we tested for whether it was resistant or not. That same year, we found another one in Masson, in Idaho, and Dr. Joel Felix took that photo. That was a private property, so we can't really disclose the location of that. The same year, in Elmore County, one crop advisor called that they sprayed sugar beet 3 times, and that's a pigweed that's not dying. You can see that some of them look hurt, but this is not going to die. And this is water hemp. And so we were convinced that this is resistant to Roundup at that stage. We did send a sample to a lab, and they came out resistant to Roundup, and probably 4 or 5 times resistant. And so even at that 4 or 5 times the use rate of Roundup, you probably won't be able to kill this pigweed. And so in 2023, we changed the game a little bit, and Clark here was instrumental in trying to get that thing going. And what we decided to do was we prepared those 1-page, that 2-page handout, kind of laminated that and gave it to most of the crop advisors to kind of tell them how to ID these pigweeds. Throw this in your truck. If you see something that looks like this, give us a call. And that was very, very effective in managing this. And so if you need a soft copy of some of these handouts, you can let me or Clark know. I can just send it to you. And so we were suspicious if this were going to get in here. One is livestock feed, because we import a lot of cottonseed meal from the south. And this, as I mentioned, especially Palmer, that's where it's native to. And so we're scared that if it's going to come in probably livestock feed or manure, because they fed that cottonseed meal to the livestock. And the right of way, because we have a lot of tracks that pass through Idaho, and then farm equipment. Those who buy used farm equipment from the Midwest or the South could probably also bring it in. And as I mentioned, seed, bird feed, cover crop seed, restoration feed, that's how this is probably going to come in. And I would mention that a lot of states that got this pigweed, this is how they came in, through contaminated seed. That's why some states moved to prohibit this pigweed in seed. They didn't list it as noxious weed, but let's make sure that they don't come in through seed. These are just some of the photos we took over the summer. This one was in Paul, Idaho, and then this is also in Paul, Idaho. You can see there's a feedlot, an organic dairy, just right by the corner. And I drove down that railway track, and I can see palm amaranth almost everywhere. And so we were probably convinced at that time that that's how they came in. And so the one who called me told me that this dairy farmer just lives down the road. So I just drove down that road, and I can see palmer all along. So maybe it's in his track. Just drive down. It's not covered, and so just blow off the field. And this one around Hammett area there, and then there's a hay field right by the corner, and I will show you that picture right away. So this right of way, kind of that suspicion was confirmed. We saw a lot in potatoes. We even took some videos that we can share with you if you are interested. Also a lot in sugar beets, and most of the ones in sugar beets survive glyphosate application because that's the main herbicide that sugar beet growers use. And so we're convinced that at least some of those were resistant to Roundup. And we saw some in small grains as well. And I would mention that it is not a huge problem in small grains because it's like a pigweed. It comes up late in the spring. And so by that time, small grains are already established. The problem is that small grains are harvested very early. And I mentioned also that we have multiple flashes of this pigweed in a year. So it means that even after the small grain harvest, you can see that the combine just clip off some of the leaves. And I went back after a month, and everything, as far as my eye can see, has set seed. And so as I showed that, I want to share this again, that if this was resistant to any herbicide, by next year, it's probably all over the field. That field will probably all be covered just because of how fast this can move. They can produce a lot of seed, and this is just from 20,000 seed. So you can imagine that huge field, how many seeds will be in that field. I saw some in hay and pasture, and this is a private property, so I was scared that I was going to get shot. And so I just peeped in there, and then I took a photo. So it's not a great photo, but just to show you that it is not just a problem in sugar beets or potatoes. It could be anywhere. This is someone's, and you can see they have a horse pasture here, and that's where it was. And also you can see, I said that Hammett area, this is a hay field, and it was harvested already by the time I got there, but I'm probably convinced that they probably have some in that hay as you're harvesting the hay. We saw some in dry beans, and I mentioned that there is not much in that dry bean. I think they sprayed a herbicide that worked well in that, but if you look by the road, you might think that, they sprayed something and everything is dead. If you look close enough, they are just curling around, and this will definitely grow back. And so either they sprayed a low herbicide rate, or this is resistant to both Roundup and a Group 4 herbicide, because from the symptoms I saw, they sprayed a Group 4 herbicide, probably dicamba or 2,4-D, and glyphosate. It's probably likely 2,4-D. So this is probably resistant to those two herbicide chemistries. And this is corn near the Jerome area, just 100 feet from a dairy. And if you probably drove around in summer, you see how tall the silage corn can get. This was way taller than the corn at that point. And so this is how tall this thing can get. I have an extension educator who was trying to pull this, and he told me that he has to kick it multiple times to probably break the stem, so they can get very big. And Clark has some photos where he has his boots by it. You can see how big this can get. And I mentioned that through bird feed in that Homedale area, and also livestock feed. This is a photo that was taken by one Bonnie Davis from, I think, Washington County. So in all, we check all those boxes that if we're going to come in, it's probably those ways. I mentioned that the one in the Bruno area, Hawaii County, that's how we suspected those came in, because it was so secluded that it probably wasn't from a truck passing by. It's probably through equipment or a tracking company or whatever they use for tracking. So Clark tried to map this out to see where they are, and this is small, so probably you won't see, you cannot read from the back there. But this is I-84. And you can see most of the ones that we found were along Y-84. So it's probably a few trucks that were driving in from the Midwest or the South, driving to Idaho, and then those were not covered. And so they was all over the place. We were convinced at some point that it's all over I-84, so it's probably no point trying to, if you're driving at 85 miles an hour and trying to look for weeds, it's a dangerous job. And we found water hemp in the Bruno area, and also Glens Ferry and Paul. And all those three samples were sent to the lab to see if they are resistant to glyphosate, and I will show you the results quickly. One thing about pigweed is that if you see a pigweed and you say, this is Palmer amaranth, you probably get 5 weed scientists in the room. They'll argue that it's not Palmer amaranth because everyone will see a feature that would think that it's different. So we send it to a lab in Colorado. They have a genetic test that will tell you exactly what species it is. And you don't have to understand any of these things here. What it means is that they confirm that all those species we found are either water hemp or Palmer amaranth. And so we ID those correctly, and so we surely have them in Idaho. Clark took those photos, and what do you see in this photo? What do you see in this photo? Yep. So everything around this is dead. And there is no way that a sprayer missed this one weed because there are weeds under that Palmer amaranth that are dead. And so this is just a clear sign that it's probably resistant to Roundup because sugar beet growers, that's the main herbicide they use. And so what we did was that we took tissue samples, a subset of those tissue samples from all the locations and sent them to the lab. And you don't have to understand the technicality here, but I would try my best to explain. In most weeds, to test for glyphosate resistance, we have what they call the EPSPS gene. And that gene in every plant binds to the Roundup and render that Roundup inactive. And so most weeds will have only one copy of that gene. And so the chemical companies, herbicide dose response or rate studies, have figured out that if you spray this amount of Roundup, it's enough to bind to that one copy of that gene, there'll be enough left to kill that plant. I don't know if that makes any sense. And so for weeds to develop resistance to Roundup, what they do is that they make multiple copies of that gene such that they can bind to increase the amount of Roundup to the extent that they will produce, at some point, they produce enough genes that it doesn't matter how much Roundup you spray or even grow them in a Roundup, they will survive that because they have enough genes to bind to each and every amount of that Roundup in that plant. And so the lab has a check that they know that it's susceptible to Roundup, and that has almost just one copy of that gene. And they have a check that is resistant to Roundup, has about 80 copies of that gene. Just to give you a perspective, around that 80, 90 to 100 copies of that gene, the researcher found that you need 40 times of the Roundup to kill that same plant in most cases. And so at this point, it's not practical to kill this with Roundup. You need a different herbicide chemistry. We sent 23 samples to the lab for resistance screening. 17, which is 70% out of them, came up resistant to Roundup. And so we're convinced that if only that small subset, 70% resistant to Roundup, it probably most of the pigweed we have are already resistant to Roundup. It means that they came from a state or states that already have resistance to Roundup, and that's what is concerning. So it might not be what Idaho farmers are going to do, Idaho ranchers are going to do in the next few years. It's probably be that they are already resistant to some of those herbicides before they get here. And also, even if they are not, it just takes a few years for them to develop resistance. And also, these ones were very close by, and so gene flow will probably make this all resistant to Roundup just in a short period of time. So that's the reason why we're concerned about this. So I hope I explained this thing well. Water hemp is a little bit different, and I forgot to mention this. Palmer amaranth, even those that are susceptible might have a few copies, not just one. But water hemp is different. If they are susceptible, they only have one copy of that gene. And so the cutoff is that anything more than 1.5, you are resistant to Roundup. And all three that are collected from Elmore, Minnesota County, were resistant to Roundup. We The one from Bruno, Hawaii County, was too dry at that point, and so I couldn't send a sample to a lab. But we sent all three samples to a lab, and all of them came back resistant to Roundup. So now what we are doing is that we are going to test all those pigweed, going to spray almost every single herbicide that we use in Idaho, around rangeland, crops, and see which herbicide they are resistant to, because if we are able to manage this, we have to know what can kill them or what can kill it. And so first thing we did, the glyphosate resistant, we screened that, and this is the untreated, this is the treated, and we spray 44 ounces of Roundup, and they look like nothing happened. They're just standing there. So we are convinced that definitely we have glyphosate resistant palm amaranth in Idaho. We also spray glufosinate or Liberty, and fortunately, all those that we sprayed, even the lowest rate, 29 ounces, control them. And so at least those populations that we got seed from, we are convinced that they are not resistant to this yet. And the word is yet. No one knows how long it's going to take, especially if we begin using most of this herbicide going forward. So no resistance to glufosinate. We also screen for resistance to Diflex, Dicamba, and XtendiMax, and fortunately, those all work on all the population that we collected, and so no resistance to glufosinate. To Dicamba at this point. Also, we test resistance to 2,4-D, and we didn't see any resistance to 2,4-D yet. And I would mention that we only collected 7 populations that had seed on them, and so this is not from 23. If we had from the 23, we probably might find some, but at this point, we encourage people to pull them before they go to seed, and so just that dilemma where you cannot tell them to leave some to go to seed or you can collect the seed. But this year, we'll probably use a different approach to see if we can capture more or go different sites. In the greenhouse right now, we have plants that are growing that we're going to spray additional herbicide chemistries. And so we would keep you informed if you are interested in this stuff, what to find going forward. And I want to say big thanks to Clark and Dr. Joel Felix from Oregon State. And this is me in the photo form. So with that, I thank the Snake Rivers. Sugar Beet guys have been instrumental in tracking this pigweed, and we have some funding from them to do some of this screening. And then all the amalgamated sugar guys who help to kind of track down this. And going forward, we want to involve as many community groups and chemical companies and all of you guys in this room to just track down this. It's probably might not be a problem now, but I just don't know how long it's going to take for it to be a problem. And also through the Colorado State University guys who kind of help do that screening for resistance. With that, thank you for your attention. I didn't want to keep you longer than I should, and so I want to leave some time for you to ask questions if you have any. And so I don't know if you were able to identify those pigweed that Clark passed around, but there's one that you are not sure what it is. Please let me know, and I can walk to your table and I kind of tell you what it is and why it is that pigweed.
Are there any questions for Dr. Adjesiwor? Nobody has a question? Wow. Does anybody need help identifying their plants? You stunned them with your brilliance.
Oh, yeah, I was sleepy. Thank you for your attention.